Hello everyone and welcome to another video here on the channel. My voice is still a little bit coarse, but that doesn't mean that we're not gonna have a video this week. So today we're gonna be talking about posing. This is one of the things that I criticize or give feedback the most in terms of character creation when people are presenting their portfolios. Yes, posing a character is definitely tricky. It requires a couple of elements. I'm gonna show you some of the tools in this video, but it will give you a huge boost in the presentation of your piece. Now, posing doesn't necessarily mean that the character has to be completely animation ready. Like the rig that you use to pose can be a different rig that you eventually use to animate the character. However, as I mentioned on our last live stream, posing your character and actually animating it is the best test that you can do to make sure that all of the things that you did were working fine until this point. Now, before we begin, a huge shout out to our good friend Lord Tellum, also known as Brandon Riley, who rigged the character that we're going to be using during this video. He did an amazing job. Make sure to check his socials, follow him, because I'm sure he's going to be doing more rigging stuff very soon. Now, why is posing important? Well, when we're doing characters, creatures, or pretty much anything, by the way, this can be applied to a lot of different things, posing the character gives the piece intention, right? Rather than just having a static piece where we showcase that, yes, we know anatomy, yes, we know proportions, yes, we know how to make a character, we actually show the character in context of what we expect the character to be doing. Look at this amazing piece, right? From the killing of Medusa. Was it Perseus? I'm pretty sure it was Perseus. And this is something that the Greeks did, again, thousands of years ago. So if our old masters did this, why shouldn't we as modern artists, modern digital artists, apply some of the principles that they've used in the past to make sure that we can get something that looks a lot more interesting? Now, interestingly enough, this is something that has been evolving through time. If you go back a little bit further, when the Egyptians were doing statues, most of the statues in the Egyptian mythology and in the Egyptian world were very static, right? Why? Because the purpose of the statues was different than the one that we have. You might need to ask an art historian specifically what they were doing, but if I'm not mistaken, it had more religious and sort of like political purposes than like this art and entertainment vibe that we now have. So this is the rig that we're going to be working with. And we're going to be working with a rig because, again, as I mentioned, Lord Tellum was super amazing and he did the rig for this character that I did as a personal project last year. And I want to show you the kind of principles that I think about when I'm posing. Now, I cannot give you this rig right now because I have not made contact with the original artist that made the design, and until I get their permission, it's like just not cool to start sharing this stuff around, but I'm waiting for an answer, and if we get an answer, I'll be sure to let you guys know. In the meantime, if you're using Maya, you can go into this one, animationmethods.com, and they have a bunch of different rigs. Just keep in mind that most of those rigs are only meant to be used for learning purposes, not for actual like commercial work. So for portfolio and things like that, it's fine, but for other stuff, you don't want to get into any issues. Okay, because as you can see, there's a lot of like copyrighted characters. Anyway, so you can grab any of this. There's a couple of them that are very famous, which is the Zelda rig and the Link rig. You can use those in Blender as well. So the same principles we're going to be talking about, well, you can use them anywhere you want. Now, the first thing that we need to do in order to get an interesting pose going is, of course, get a reference. So if we go for female pose reference, we should be finding a lot of very interesting poses that we can use for a character, and it can be any type of poses. We're going to start with a standing pose, something not super dynamic, but something that looks like interesting. This one right here looks quite interesting because we have a nice, interesting angle, and there's a little bit of use with the props. We can include the mask and everything. I'm going to copy this thing right here, and let's very quickly bring it into Krita, where we're going to be doing a very quick analysis of the pose. This is one of those things that you guys, and I myself included, like I'm guilty of this. We don't analyze stuff enough. We don't really like take a couple of minutes to just check what we're actually going for. So when you're taking a look at the pose, the most important thing that you want to capture are the three main masses, which is the head, the torso, and the pelvis. All of these main masses are going to be connected by, of course, the spine, and that's what's going to give our characters gesture. We talk about this quite a bit on the modeling side of things, but they're going to be especially important here on the posing part of things. So here's where we're going to have the head of the character. I'm using the Loomis method to sort of like map out the planes of the face, and this is very important. Look at the angle of the eyes, right? Like this angle is going to be very important to make sure that we identify with the proper position of the head. Here's a cool trick. If this is for drawing, but this applies to pretty much anything. If you have the head of your character, you have the eye line, right? And the ears are in line with the eyes, this character is looking forward. If you have a head of the character and you have the eye line, let's say right here, and the ears are on top of the eyes, it looks like the character is looking down. And if we have the head and the eyes are up here and the ears are underneath the eyes, it looks like the character is looking up. So right here, for instance, I know that one of the ears is going to be around here and the other one's going to be around here. So that tells me that the angle of the tilt is going to be a little bit different. This is where we're going to have the ribcage. Again, I'm marking the center line of the ribcage right here. And her pants are a very good way to find where the pelvis is going to be. So that's what we have. if we join these things, and I'm actually going to use another color here, if we join these things right here, you're going to see that we have a very nice clean S-curve going from the head to the legs like that. And let's turn off the picture right here, and you can see that only with the basic shapes seen into the space, we should be able to see a very dynamic pose going on. Now, before we continue, I know you guys are not subscribed. We have the information. So if you like these videos and you're learning, which is the most important thing, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And let's continue. So the way I like to approach my poses is as follows. First, I always go to the center of gravity, which in this case is this rig or this element right here, which is my main sort of like a pelvis element. As you can see, most of the weight of this character is actually falling on the right leg. Why do I know this? Because she's using a very common pose known as contrapposto. So contrapposto is again a very common technique to pose a character, again used by ancient Romans and Greeks, and it tilts the character in a slightly different direction. The leg that's usually the straightest is the one that's holding most of the weight, and you can see that that is this one right here on the backside of the character. So what I want to do is I'm going to ignore the head for just now. I'm just going to modify this. I'm going to push the character down a little bit so there's a little bit of pressure going on so that it feels like she's actually landing on the floor. And then I'm going to rotate this thing so we get this straight side here on the right side of the character. Usually I always like to go to the feet and just move them a little bit, you know, give them a little bit of like dynamism, because usually they tend to be sort of like quite boring and quite flat. This character has a lot of accessories like this scrolls right here, and all of them are rigged like amazingly because of the ropes and everything. So we're gonna have to sort of like modify some of them a little bit just to make sure that there's not too much overlap, but that shouldn't be the main focus of the character right now. Another thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rotate this character back a little bit. Why? Because I want to sort of like emphasize that C-curve shape that we're gonna have for the particular pose, sort of give this like epic look that we're going for. Something like this. Now, shoulders. Shoulders are going to be important. Shoulders are going to be controlled with this one right here, the control shape. Of course, we can use the clavicle too to move things around, but I'm going to use this initial torso to sort of like tilt the torso back. And this is where we can really see the contrapposto in action. That's one line right there, and this is a line right here. Here, we're going to have a squash of the body, and here we're going to have a stretch of the body. That's one of the principles of animation, squash and a stretch, and it's one of those things that allows us to have a lot of realism with this whole thing. I'm also going to sort of like push it back a little bit more to inflate her chest a little bit forward, and there we go. Now we can grab the head, and again, following the same sort of like direction that we have, I can start twisting her head, tilting it, sort of like looking up a little bit, and we have this one right here, which are the eyes, so we can make her look slightly to the side like this. We might not be able to match all of the expression because the eyes are a little bit sort of like, I don't want to say broken, but they're a little bit different than the ones from the character, but there we go. So that's giving us, again, the initial structure of the main parts of the body, the sort of like the core principles of the character. And we're going to see this quite a bit in the next pose, where we're going to be doing a more dynamic pose. So the next stuff is the arms. This one right here, this is right now set to FK. For those of you that are new to animation, there's two systems that you usually are going to have: forward kinematic and inverse kinematic. This one right here is set to inverse kinematic, meaning that I decide where the end of the joint chain is, which in this case is the wrist, and everything else, in this case the shoulder and the elbow, are going to try to accommodate to find the proper position depending on where the wrist is. So usually for an IK system, we're going to have one controller moving, again, the whole system, and then this little thing right here called the pole vector, which allows me to modify the pointing of the middle joint right there. Very useful for legs and arms and other things. So this one right now, I'm just going to sort of like move it down and have her arm very, very sort of like straight out right here. Now, I want you to see something on the fingers, and this is very, very common. Fingers are one of those things, and I remember when I first started, like, I always avoided doing fingers because they tend to be quite tricky, right? Quite difficult. But when your hand is in a normal sort of like relaxed state, this is the usual pose that it does. I like ask you to do this right now. Just put your arm forward. I know you're gonna look really stupid, but trust me. And just relax your fingers as much as you can. And you're gonna see that the index finger and the middle finger are very much straight. Not completely straight, but very much straight. And the other two fingers, in this case, the pinky finger and the ring finger, they tend to curl up a little bit more. We can, of course, exaggerate that a little bit more and give it more dynamism. But by default, when our hand is just resting, it's always going to have this sort of like curly effect. It's never completely straight, right? Normally when we sculpt characters, we do them with straight fingers, especially if they're like in a T-pose. But in this particular case, we always want to add a little bit of gesture. And thankfully, again, our good friend Lord Tellum here added a nice little grip controller here that I can do to just like curl these things a little bit right there. And then I can independently go and modify some of the fingers, so like straighten them up again to just break the symmetry and make sure that it doesn't look like super obvious. So this right here, just adding a little bit of gesture to your fingers, is one of those things that can really make your sculpt go to the next level. Now for the other arm, I'm gonna show you the other like way of doing it. Instead of using the IK, I'm gonna go to the main controller, and for the right arm, I'm gonna set this to 1. So now this is in forward kinematic, meaning that I first move this joint right here, which is my what's the word? My shoulder joint, and then I move this joint right here, which is the elbow joint, and then finally the wrist. Now, very important, clavicles. A lot of people forget about clavicles, but clavicles are really, really important to give our character more life. So for instance, this left arm, we can sort of like push it up with the clavicles just a little bit. That, of course, means that we're gonna have to adjust this thing a little bit right here. Very important that the pull vector is always in a position that makes sense. Oh, this is very important. Another question. I know this is a little bit like further down in the video, but if you're doing like hand painted stuff, lighting, and then use flash lighting to make sure that you're seeing the proper texture. So something like that. So for working kinematic, one of the things that I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to push the shoulder back a little bit, because you can see that the elbow is sort of like really low in this area, in this like back part right here. So I'm going to really sort of like make her shoulder go down quite a bit. Then I'm going to grab this one, and ideally the Z-axis in this case should be more than enough to just push everything in a very sort of like natural way, going to this direction right there. Awesome. This little controller has one thing where I can go to the right hand. There you go. So I can immediately pose it to the right hand. Have her grab the dagger on a reversed grip. Like a reverse grip. The reason why I want to do a reverse grip in this particular case is because I just want it to look a little bit more aggressive, and I don't want the dagger to be covering her face. I'm going to go right here. Very important. I'm going to rotate the hand a little bit. And as you can see, I'm going to rotate or change the rotation so that it's not perfectly aligned. This is also part of sort of like breaking the symmetry with the whole thing. Let's add a little bit of a grip. And now let's just position this dagger on her hand. There you go. Oof, that looks amazing. Very important here. This is another one of those things that a lot of people like get confused about. Don't be afraid of really pushing the grip, even if we have a little bit of overlap. It's better for this thing to look like she's really holding onto it rather than it looking like it's actually like not touching it, right? So for instance, here, I'm going to just adjust a couple of fingers to make sure that they look as nice as possible. For instance, here the nails, maybe just push them out a little bit. There we go. That they're not overlapping too much, but I do want to give the effect that this thing is properly holding the dagger. When I did this character, my idea or my sort of like goal was to make it super low poly, something similar to what we might find in like a League of Legends. So that's why you see very, very sort of like faceted looks, especially on like the fingers and the hands. I believe like, yeah, you can see the whole scene here. It's only 17,000 triangles for everything, right? For her, for the mask, for everything. So there we go. We have the basic pose. What can we do to make it a little bit better? Exaggeration. That's another one of like the principles of animation that we can do. And by exaggerating, I mean just like pushing the poses a little bit more intensely. So for instance, let's push the shoulder up a little bit more right there. Bring the hand in a little bit more. Rotate it. Make sure that it looks like it's like really relaxed, right? Like I don't want it to look like she's exerting any sort of like force or anything. We do have a little bit of expressions here. So for instance, I can see that on the character, she's a little bit like angry. It's like the corner of the lips. So we can do this. We can grab maybe some of the eyebrows and just make her a little bit more angry than usual. Now, very important. This is one of those like little details that if you do them, you're always going to get like a nicer pose. Gravity, right? So this earring right here, we need to like rotate it so that the gravity indicates that the earring is falling straight, right? Completely straight. It might not seem like much, but it really adds to selling the illusion that there's like something going here. Now, finally, this guy right here, let's position him right over on this side. And you always got to think about the shot, right? Like, what is this shot going to be about? So in this particular case, I'm thinking of a shot like this, right? Like maybe a cinematic or like a character selection screen or something like that. And if we think about this, we can just like push the little mask right here. And he's like, hey, what's up, guys? So like just going through the back part of the element right there. I also have a couple of controllers here, and we're just going to move them around and generate something that looks a bit more interesting. He has this jaw joint, which is really cool. And I'm going to do this. Now, very interestingly, where do we place the jaw? Do we place it here or do we place it here? The answer is you usually want to have invisible curves that sort of like point towards the main sort of like attention, right? So as you can see, most of the lines in general, right? Like it's not a specific line that's pointing to the character, but most of the lines are going to be pointing towards her. Like the direction of that curve, we're pushing them so that we can look at her. So that's it's one of those like animation things or composition things that we can use to our advantage to get a nice result in the composition. So that's it. First pose. This is the first pose of the character, and we're happy with it. I should have done something in the beginning of the stage where I saved the rig with a different sort of like like name and whatever, so that we can just like quickly go through them, but it's fine. I'm just gonna go here, select all by type, and we're gonna do NURBS curves, and I'm just gonna hit S so that all of the curves are now animated, and I have this keyframe saved in frame 2. So at any point, if I want to go back to frame 2, which is again like a very relaxed pose, we're going to be able to do it. Now let's go for a more dynamic pose. I was having a very hard time finding something useful, and I found this one right here. This is actually not a photograph, but it's a really cool pose that is being used in this case for a miniature, and we can utilize this as part of our character creation, right? Now, again, similar to what we did before, we need to find that line of action. Where is the face? Where is the rib cage, right? And the direction of the rib cage, where is the pelvis? And then look at that super sharp effect right here. Now, here I want to talk about something very important that's called a balance, right? One of the reasons why some poses don't look good is because they're lacking balance. And how do we find balance? Well, if we go to our first pose right here, this is a very simple like pose that should be balanced just by default, right? However, there's a specific rule that I like to follow. This was taught to me by my sculpting teacher 12 years ago, and he called it the plumb line, which is an imaginary line that goes from the base of the neck right there, from the pit of the neck right on this area right here, to the floor. Now, if you draw a quadrant, right, like a little polygon going from the back of your foot to the front of your foot, across to the other foot, and then like this, and this plumb line falls into this area right here, that means that you're safe. The character is going to feel as it's balanced, and it's not going to look like it's falling over. And you can try this very easily. If we grab, for instance, the main curve right here, and we push the character forward with all of this stuff, there she looks unbalanced. Why? Because that plumb line is right there on the tip of the element, and she looks like she's falling forward. Same stuff if we do something like this. The top part of the character might not look unbalanced, but if we take a look at the bottom part, it definitely feels like she's about to fall like back, right? So it's very important to follow that plumb line, and that's exactly what we can see right here. If we imagine where that plumb line is on the character, it's going to be right there, and the way this falls down to is on this position right here. Okay, now there's another thing that's making this figure or this pose look very balanced, and that's the sort of like direction of the forces, right? This is in the middle of an action, so I'm sure no one could, well, like probably, right? But no one could probably hold this pose for long. It's something that's happening in between actions, but even in this in between parts of the action, the character should still feel grounded and balanced. So now, I don't want to bore you with all of the controllers and picking stuff and moving things around, but I just want you to see at this quick time lapse that we're showing right here. And these are the same principles that we're using when thinking about a more dynamic pose. Where are the hips? Where is the head? Where is the torso? How are things joining, twisting, moving around? And most especially, how is the weight balance on the character? I know this is something that we as character artists don't usually do. We don't focus much on this like posing and dynamic aspects of things. But this is a question that I got asked not too long ago. It's like, how do you know so many things? Well, I just like to learn a lot about a lot of different elements, and my job has required me to learn a little bit about all the different pipelines. And one thing that I realized is by learning a little bit about, for instance, rigging or animation, you become a better modeler. You understand better what the needs of the animators and riggers are going to be, and your topology improves, your modeling improves. So all of these things that we're learning, even though they might not be the main thing that we're going to be doing on the job, can help us be better artists as a whole. So yeah, this is pretty much it. This is the general process for the dynamic pose. And there we go. Now, as I mentioned on the live stream, if you press Alt-1, all of the curves are going to disappear, and we're going to be left only with the actual pose of the character. So this is one of the things that we can do to, you know, start like looking at how we're going to be presenting our work. Again, do you as a character artist need to like pose, model, and prepare all of your character with like a proper rig and everything? No, this is not expected from a character artist. However, if you get the chance to pose your characters, even if you're just going to be doing this inside of Zbrush, then doing it can really elevate like a very sort of like basic traditional looking character into something that looks a little bit more complex. And another very important thing about the posing process, as you can see right here, is that it's a proof. It's a proof that your work works, right? It's a proof that your textures hold. It's a proof that your topology deforms properly. It's a proof that your proportions are right. And that is a very good guarantee that you can give, for instance, a recruiter or a studio that says, hey, I know my stuff, I know how to make it, and I can assure you, because I can demonstrate it here with an actual example, that it will work in production. So that's pretty much it, my friends. With this, we're done with like the posing of the character. I know that it's a very sort of like simple project or simple video, but at the same time, the information that we covered here, I hope was useful to you. If you like this, of course, you know, you can help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. And that's pretty much it. I think this is it for this character. I would love to do more stuff with her, to be honest, like maybe animate her. We did a little bit of an animation on the last live stream in case you want to check it out. But but you know, for now, I think it's time to move on to other characters I've used, and I've done a lot of stuff with this one already. So yeah, that's pretty much it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this short video, and hopefully I'll see you back very, very soon. Thank you very much, and don't forget, always learning, always improving. Bye-bye.